I filmed an ad for Lexus, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I did it, but specifically what I did differently that you typically wouldn't expect to see in an ad for a car. Often when we think about filming a commercial or shooting an ad, we think about big, expensive video productions with multiple vehicles, cranes, and specialized video equipment, but I used none of that. So I'll talk about the gear that I did use, I'll break down 3 of my favorite shots, and give you some tips and tricks to try, even if all you have is a minimal amount of camera gear. For transparency, this video was filmed as part of a social media campaign, which is becoming an increasingly popular way for car companies to advertise. Rather than spending all of their budget on one big, expensive video shoot for TV, they'll take that same budget and spread it out across multiple content creators or multiple smaller ads. So while this might not be a commercial on television, it was still an ad that was paid for and sponsored by Lexus. Now, this video is not sponsored by Lexus, but it is sponsored by Artlist, and I'll tell you more about how that came into play later in the video. Now, the concept for this video was super simple. Most people in this position to make an ad or make a sponsored post for a car company would kind of default to making a car commercial where you talk about how the vehicle is so great, all of its features, and you basically become a salesman for that car or for that car company. And this is where I want it to be a little bit different and lean into what makes my content a little bit more great, all of its features, to the expectations that you have as a viewer. So I knew that we were working with an off-road vehicle. I knew that I would film it in some cool locations, which happens to align pretty well with the content that I create. A lot of the time I'm going on photo adventures with my friends, going to locations where you can't necessarily get to very easily. And so the car became the tool that enabled us to capture the photos that we normally capture. And so the way that the concept worked out was to combine a bunch of high energy beauty shots of the vehicle with a bunch of more organic behind the scenes style shots. So the video starts off and you actually get 2 BTS clips. So there's one clip of me and Stefano standing on this beach where you can kind of see that the car is in the background, but then I jump to this shot, which is the first example I want to use, where I basically just took my Canon R6 Mark II, handed it to Taha with a 24-70 and said, capture whatever you feel like capturing. And so in that moment when we were filming the car, Stefano was in the car basically doing these donuts over and over, and Taha was filming me filming the donuts. And for most of this video, I was shooting on the Canon R5. There were a few moments where I swapped to the R6 Mark II, but mainly with the 15-35, so the wide angle lens, which I'll talk about why I chose that lens in a little bit. So what ends up happening is that those first 2 clips end up paying off at the end of the video, where you see the 120 frames per second slow-mo shot, and then this beauty shot, this telephoto shot that was perfect of the sun setting behind the car as we were filming it. And then if you look in the middle of the video, there's like a third example of this, where you see me emerging from the forest with my camera in vertical mode, and I'm basically following behind the car. And the reason we ended up doing this rather than doing like a rolling shot or a follow shot with another vehicle is that this was actually an off-road vehicle area where you couldn't get to there with normal cars. And of course, we didn't have another vehicle. We didn't have an ATV or a dirt bike that we could do a follow shot with. And I figured, well, the car's not moving very fast. So I basically took my camera, put it in vertical mode with the handle, turned on image stabilization just to make it look a little bit smoother, but no gimbal movements. I kind of wanted that little bit more of a raw, handheld, off-road type feeling. And then a few seconds later, the shot ends up paying off and you see the actual shot that I filmed. Now, regardless of what type of gear you used, you can get most of these shots. We didn't use any fancy equipment. All of the BTS was captured on the R6 Mark II, but if you're trying to give that organic feeling of behind the scenes, there's nothing that says you can't just use some clips, some video that's shot on your phone and insert it to kind of create that same dynamic where you have the beauty shot, but then you have the BTS shot. Now, I did take quite a few shots that didn't end up making their way into the video. At this point, I think I have something like 3 hours of BTS footage and 700 gigabytes of videos and photos. And a lot of the photos that we captured were just all of the different moments where we had the vehicle. And I've kind of shared those over on Instagram. But if you want to see any more content, any more videos made about this photo shoot, let me know what you want to see down in the comments below. Initially, when I storyboarded this shoot, I had an idea to do a POV steering shot where the example that I saw on Instagram was using a full-size mirrorless camera, and I tried that, but it was a little bit too heavy for the steering wheel and basically made it impossible and actually unsafe to steer. So I ended up using just a regular GoPro with one of these clamps, and honestly, if you're gonna invest in any sort of BTS cam or any kind of just like, oh, I don't know if I want the footage, but maybe I'll attach it, the GoPro, which in this case I was using the Hero 12 with one of these clamps, and I'll link this setup down in the description. But the nice thing about the new GoPros is that you can actually put it into, I don't know if you want to call it like an open gate, but it's like a wide aspect ratio format, so that if you want to recrop, it's a lot easier to use the footage both vertically and horizontally. Another shot that I wanted to try was driving over the camera, which is a little bit of a logistical challenge because you don't want to run over a nice camera. And so again, I decided to just set up the GoPro. In this case, Taha actually set it up and used the same setup and then just clamped the clamp to, I think it was like a rock, and then set it in this river or in this washout area that we were driving through. And I ran it a few times because I wasn't sure what it was gonna look like in different directions with different lighting. But the one time I ran it, it actually just knocked over the GoPro. And at first I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. Now the GoPro is wet, which isn't a big deal because they can handle it. But then Taha pointed out, hey, maybe you can transition that because it's gonna fall over. And that's when I figured, oh, perfect. Now I have my transition shot. I can transition the rolling of the GoPro into the rolling of the wheel. And that turned out to be the pivotal moment inside the video where everything kind of shifts and you go from, okay, we're introing the video to now we're actually out exploring and shooting the photos that we want to shoot. So if you're looking for a beginner-friendly shot and you don't have a super massive camera, it actually benefits you to maybe just use something like your phone, set it down on the ground because it's low enough to go under a car. Full disclaimer, if you run over your phone, I am not responsible. Or in our case, use something like a GoPro, which worked really well. But let me show you what that looks like inside of my editing timeline. So this is the insanity that is this edit. It seems a little bit overkill for something that's only 30 seconds long, but if I go to the moment where we have, okay, so this is the shot of the GoPro, and you can see I ran a little bit too fast with the car and the waves ended up knocking the GoPro over, but right here, the wave hits it, oh shoot, the rock falls over, it goes in, it goes to black, and then I basically just fade into a shot of the wheel turning. And I actually had multiple shots of the wheel turning. The campaign wanted me to use one where I had two hands on the wheel, but there was another one that kind of worked really well where we were at the track later on and I was spinning the wheel a lot faster. But for the sake of the Instagram post, we just left it with this one. And you might also notice that I've got a few extra layers on top here, and that is actually stock footage that I got from Artlist. Now, when I'm making these edits, a lot of the time I'm gathering resources to add extra layers. So things like the sound effects. When you watch this back and you turn off the music and you just look at all those extra layers, you can see that I'm adding things like the sounds of tires or the sounds of engines or these whooshes or these camera sound effects. And all of those I was able to get from Artlist. I did also end up mixing that with some of the audio from the GoPro itself because it's kind of hard to replicate some of those things, but you can take the scratch footage from your camera, grab some sound effects, grab some music from Artlist, or in my case, also grab some of those overlays, put them on top, turn it to like a screen blending mode or an overlay blending mode, and basically level up those transitions that would otherwise just kind of be plain, boring old transitions. Now, I've trusted Artlist for more than 2 years now for pretty much 99% of the long form videos and short form videos that I posted on my channel. And if you're looking to do the same because you want to level up your edits or you want to add extra things, I think now they even have AI voiceover on select plans, or if all you want is AI voiceover, you can also get that on its own plan. And if Artlist is something you're considering, the best way to get it is using my link down in the description. Because not only will you get 2 months free off of an annual plan, you'll also be supporting me and allow me to do more fun, cool edits and behind the scenes videos like this. So thanks to Artlist for making this video possible and continuing to be a supporter of everything that I do. There is one shot that almost didn't make the final edit, and it is this one right here of Stefano driving the Lexus GX up this massive dirt mound that was graciously built for us by the team at Oro Station Motor Circuit. So if you're in the Toronto area or if you're in Barrie, this is a brand new racetrack facility. It's currently being built, hence the dirt mounds, but my friends Taylor and Wes actually gave us access to their property for the afternoon. So not only were we able to get these awesome shots and all these photos, but some of the clips that you saw earlier of us drifting donuts in the dirt is all filmed at their property. But in order to make that possible, we needed to do it safely and be able to communicate to the person filming, to the person driving, and when we were climbing up the hill, we also had spotters watching to make sure that everything we were doing was safe. And you may have noticed that in some of the clips, we're actually wearing these guys, which are the Hollyland Solidcom C1 Pros. So this one here is you can flip them. So you can flip the side if you want the little headset to be on one side or the other, but they go for 300 meters or 1,000 feet, basically. So in our case, because it was a big open area, we were able to have someone in the passenger seat or the driver wearing the headset and basically receiving directions from whoever it was that was shooting. The nice thing is that unlike regular radios or walkie-talkies, you don't have to push a button to communicate. It's basically just open comms all the time. And then if you don't want to talk, you can just hit the mute button on the side. They are super simple to use, and I believe the battery lasts for either 10 hours or 6 hours, depending on if you're using the master unit or one of the sub units. And big thanks to Hollyland, they did send that out to both Stefano and myself, and we were able to use those, and they worked perfectly. You might have also noticed that a lot of the clips I'm showing you are filmed horizontally. Even some of the ones that ended up making their way into the final video were filmed on my Canon R5 with the 15-35. And this is where the wide angle lens comes into play. Because I can go super wide at 15 millimeters, or even 25 millimeters tends to work pretty well. I shot those at 4K, a lot of it in just 24 frames per second, but I framed it a little bit wider knowing that I was gonna crop the footage. And this is the same technique that I covered in my video on stop shooting vertically, shoot things horizontally, because in a lot of cases, if you film it vertically, you can't ever reuse that footage. So if there's a shot that you know is super critical that you're only gonna have one chance to get, I would always recommend shooting it a little bit wider, shooting it horizontal, and then shooting it in the highest resolution that you can. In this case, we shot in 4K. Now, you may have noticed two very specific shots in this video where it looked like the camera was attached to the side of the car. And that's because it was. Much like the GoPro shot that you saw earlier where we attached the GoPro to the wheel, we actually took the camera and mounted it to the outside of the car. And I want to take credit for this shot, but it is super popular right now with like tech content and even some vlogging content where you'll lock off the shot to the object that you're shooting. Now, in this case, I actually saw my friends Kyle Meshna and Johnny Romes over on Instagram do this. They make a ton of awesome overlanding, off-roading content. And I saw the shot and I thought, okay, I need to build a rig for this for myself. So I actually reached out to my friends over at Small Rig and they were able to hook me up with a bunch of their suction cup mounts. Now, a lot of different companies make these, but because a lot of my gear is already Small Rig, I figured it would make sense because everything would be compatible. But basically what this is, it is 3 arms. There's a friction arm, you screw it in, and then there are these little plungers that you basically just push, plunge, hammer on, whatever you call this. And then these attach to a base plate. So this is kind of like a custom rig where I just have any sort of Arca Swiss plate goes right on there. Now, if I was to make one modification to this system, the weakness that it has is that once you've locked it onto the car, there's no real way to make micro adjustments. So if I was to add one extra thing, I would probably take a ball head and screw it on to this base plate. So rather than just having an Arca Swiss like adapter thing here, I would probably add that extra layer of customization. Now, when you're doing shots like this, it's important to keep in mind reflections, because you can do it where you see the outside of the car and maybe the sun is hitting it and it doesn't look so good because it's just all you're seeing is sun, or you're shooting the windshield of a car. And in a few cases, we tried to do that shot, and because of the lighting where the inside of the car is dark and the outside of the car is bright, it becomes a little bit hard to see through the windshield. So either you want to like open the windows or the sunroof to let more light in so that you can actually see the faces of the people sitting inside the car. But if you're interested in building something like this to get that style of shot, whether or not you're applying it to cars, you can also use it where you just attach it to a window and film shots of yourself with a suction cup mount. I'll link all of those components down in the description so you can build that or check it out for yourself. I've always kind of assumed that filming cars or filming car commercials was a lot of work because of all the extra equipment that you needed, like those follow cars and those cranes and all the crazy movements that you see them make. But when you break it down into really simple terms, okay, what do I actually need to see? Is a GoPro good enough if I just run it over and drown it in water? Can I suction cup mount a camera to the side of the car to get a really unique perspective of the person driving? With a little bit of extra equipment, you can take the camera gear that you already own and really level up your video edits. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of everything that went into this video, from planning to pre-production to production to editing, and of course, adding all those sound effects and layers that you saw that I got from Artlist. So if you're interested in more content, go from planning to found some of the gear that I use and maybe talk about Artlist a little bit more. If you haven't already checked them out, link is down in the description, but do let me know what you enjoyed from this video because I really enjoyed making it. I really enjoyed shooting this campaign. Even if it wasn't my typical photo style content, I think video has a lot of lessons that we can learn from. Oh, my camera's over there. So of course, as always, until the next one, grab your camera, get out, and go shoot photos.